faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings at a single bound. Look, up in the sky. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's
Superman.
We know that one pretty well, at least the older among us do. Certainly, Superman, as one of the superheroes, has been a part of our popular culture here for a long, long time, starting with the comic strip back in the 1930s, which then we started to hear the adventures of Superman on the radio in the 40s. And then in the 50s, with television, The Adventures of Superman, I think, was one of the first weekly programs that came on TV. And of course, in more recent years, there's been several full-length, feature-length movies on Superman and the Man of Steel in our theaters as well. As I say, of all the superheroes, Superman is probably the kind of the most popular one in our popular culture. In fact, it's said that at Halloween, the Superman costume is an extremely popular costume for many kids. Superwoman for the girls, Superman for the boys. And I was told this one little story where it was a little boy, a kindergartner, I think he was, who decided he was going to be Superman for Halloween, so he had his Superman costume, and he really loved it, and he was on the day there was going to be a Halloween party at school, he was dressed in his costume in the morning, and he was kind of running around the house saying, I'm Superman, I'm stronger than anybody. He was jumping off chairs as though he could fly, And finally it was time to leave to go to school, and it was raining out. And so little Superman kind of hugged the leg of his mom, who held an umbrella over him as he went to school. And I thought that's kind of a great picture of Superman. You may have heard the story, too. I once shared it before. Actually, I had it on the wrong person. It was Muhammad Ali. At the height of his success as heavyweight champion, he was on a plane. He was flying from one city to another, and the plane was ready to take off, and the flight attendant came up to him in the first class and said, Mr. Ali, we're about to take off. Can you please fasten your seatbelt? And in his typically comical, arrogant way, he said to her, Superman don't need no seatbelt. And she didn't miss a beat and responded by saying, Superman don't need no airplane. Even the real Superman knew about the challenge of kryptonite, which made him weak. It's interesting, in the gospel today, Jesus tells us a parable about a Pharisee and a tax collector, and he shows us a Pharisee who really sees himself as a religious Superman. And according to the parable, this Pharisee in his prayer is telling God how great he is. I pay tithes and all my income, I fast twice a week. I'm so much better than all these other folks. And then there's the tax collector in the back who recognizes his own sins as he's kind of beating his chest and asking God's mercy. And we're told that it was the tax collector whose prayer was heard. Because the Pharisee did not recognize, in his prayer at least, that in fact he's a sinner as well. That he has his limitations, he has his faults. There's a kryptonite in his life too. It's not something outside of him, it's something inside of him, as it is in every one of us who are citizens of this earth. In our moral classes, we always refer to it as concupiscence. That's the church word for saying that within all of us, even though we're good and created as good, we have a tendency to evil, a tendency to selfishness, a tendency to self-centeredness. And so for every one of us, as good as we may be, as resourceful as we may be, as gifted as we may be, each one of us also has our limitations, our kryptonite inside. That is a sign of our weakness. And it's important for us to acknowledge those limitations in our relationship to God. There was a woman who went to the doctor who she was having some problems, and so the doctor was trying to get a fix on what was going on. So he did some examinations, but then he was kind of interviewing her, and he said, well, now let's see, do you drink? She said, oh, no, I don't touch alcohol. I never have, never will. And he's, okay. And he said, do you smoke? She said, I've never smoked tobacco, and I never have, and I never will. And he said, well, how about your diet? Are you, she said, no, I watch what I eat. I never eat saturated fats. And then he says, oh, you get enough exercise? She says, I exercise 3 days a week and really try to watch my weight. And he said, well, what exactly is the problem? And she said, well, I get these severe headaches. And with a smile, he looked at her and he said, I think your halo is too tight. We try to do our best. Even within spirituality, we talk about striving for perfection, but none of us will get there until life after death. And so it's important for us to recognize that. And that's what Jesus is trying to tell us in the scriptures today in his parable, very simply. That yes, we are good. We are created as good, just as all of God's creation is good. And yet within us human beings, there is this kind of tilt toward selfishness. And we need to acknowledge that. We need to do our best to rise above our imperfections, our limitations, our faults, but at the same time recognize that they're part of our humanity. And that when we offer ourselves to God in prayer, we are not supermen, superwomen, but we recognize that kryptonite that's inside of us that affects our strength and shows our weakness. If we can be honest in that profession of faith to our God, then we are being the faithful disciple that Jesus calls us to. May we be true to that way of discipleship, recognizing our strengths, but also recognizing our limitations.